There are moments in life when a single act of disrespect echoes far louder than anyone expects, and this story begins with one of those moments. Picture a quiet street, just before sunset, the kind of place where people rarely stop to notice anything unusual. Yet that evening, everyone froze as a wealthy man, dressed in immaculate designer clothes, pointed at an old biker's worn jacket and laughed with the kind of arrogance that chills the air. No one knew the biker's name, but the sadness in his eyes revealed a lifetime of roads traveled, losses carried, and lessons learned. What no one realized that day was that humiliation, once planted, can grow roots deep enough to shake an empire. The rich man believed his money made him untouchable. He believed his mansion, standing tall behind iron gates, protected him from consequences. As he insulted the biker, calling him worthless and mocking his age, passers-by watched in uneasy silence. Yet beneath that silence, something powerful brewed. The biker didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself, didn't strike back. He simply stared at the man with a calm so unnerving that even the onlookers felt a tremor inside. It was the calm of someone who had survived storms far more violent than insults. What the rich man failed to understand was that the old biker was not alone. He belonged to a brotherhood, a family not built on blood, but on loyalty forged over decades of shared miles. And in that world, respect is not optional. When the biker rode away that evening, his engine whispering through the dusk, a message spread quietly among riders across the state. One by one, men and women who valued honor above everything else felt something stir inside them. They didn't need to hear the whole story. The look in their brothers' eyes told them enough. By dawn, the roads hummed with engines. Not one or two riders, but dozens, then dozens more. Some drove through the night. Others left work without a second thought, all guided by the same unspoken understanding. No one humiliates one of their own. As the sun climbed, the mansion at the top of the hill became the final destination of an unbreakable force. The wealthy man woke expecting an ordinary morning, unaware that the previous day's cruelty was returning, multiplied beyond anything he could imagine. When he walked outside, prepared to enjoy the comfort he believed he deserved, he stopped dead in his tracks. In complete silence, stretching across the entire front of his property, sat more than 200 bikers. Engines off, eyes fixed on him. No words shouted, no threats made, just a wall of unwavering presence. And in that silence, heavier than thunder, he felt something he had never felt in his life: consequences. When the wealthy man's gaze met the silent wall of riders, something inside him twisted in a way he didn't expect. He had always carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed power came from possessions, from status, from the size of his gates. But now, surrounded by hundreds of unmovable figures, he felt a vulnerability he didn't even know existed. He tried to speak, but the words came out thin and shaky, swallowed by the heavy silence. Every biker remained still, their expressions carved in stone, as if waiting for him to confront the weight of his own actions. The old biker stood near the front of the group, his shoulders relaxed, and his face calm. He didn't step forward, didn't posture, didn't attempt to intimidate. Instead, he watched the man with an almost unsettling gentleness, like someone who understood the depth of a wound without needing to reopen it. That gentleness, however, only intensified the guilt pressing down on the wealthy man's chest. He suddenly remembered the look in the biker's eyes the day before. Not anger, not fear, but a quiet disappointment that lingered far longer than any insult. As the tension grew, the neighbors began peeking from their windows. They whispered among themselves, unsure whether they were witnessing the beginning of a confrontation or the unraveling of a man's pride. The wealthy man's hands trembled slightly as he attempted to step forward, but even the simple act of walking felt heavier under the stare of hundreds who had come not for violence, but for truth. Every step reminded him of his mistake, each movement echoing the realization that he had misjudged the value of a stranger. The old biker finally broke the silence with a slow, deliberate movement. He removed his helmet and placed it gently on the ground, revealing a face marked not by age alone, but by years of struggle, miles traveled and battles survived. His voice, when he finally spoke, was impossibly calm. He didn't raise accusations. He didn't demand apologies. Instead, he said something that cut deeper than anger ever could. That respect is not something you demand with wealth, but something you earn with humanity. The words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. For the first time in his life, the wealthy man felt smaller than his own shadow. The truth was undeniable, and the presence of 200 riders only amplified it. His world, built on arrogance and assumption, seemed suddenly fragile. He realized that the biker before him possessed something he had never truly understood, a sense of belonging, of brotherhood, of loyalty that no amount of money could buy. And standing there, surrounded by the silent force of unity, he grasped that real power has nothing to do with status, but with the people who stand with you when life threatens to crumble. The wealthy man's mind drifted back to the moment he had mocked the old biker in public. In his memory, he could now see details he had ignored the first time. The slight limp in the biker's step, the patches on his jacket representing decades of rides, the way his hands, worn and scarred, had held on to something far more valuable than money: experience. That memory sank into his conscience like a weight, and for the first time, he recognized the cruelty of his actions. He had not mocked a stranger. He had mocked someone who had lived more life than he could begin to imagine. The riders remained in complete silence, allowing the wealthy man to feel the full impact of his realizations. It was not intimidation. It was reflection. They weren't punishing him. They were giving him space to confront himself. Slowly, his breathing grew shallow, and he felt his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He had never been held accountable in such a profound way, and the intensity of the moment pressed against him like the first wave before a storm. He wished he could go back, undo his arrogance, erase the moment he had chosen pride over kindness. But the old biker didn't let the silence become suffocating. With a single step forward, he shifted the rhythm of the moment. His voice remained calm, steady, grounded in something deeper than anger. He explained that people judge too quickly, that they forget every face they see carries a story. He spoke of the roads that shape a person, the struggles that harden them, the moments that either break them or teach them. And as he spoke, even the riders behind him lowered their heads in acknowledgement, honoring the weight of those truths. The wealthy man listened, each word feeling like a mirror held in front of him. He began noticing things he had once dismissed: the old biker's humility, the strength beneath his quietness, the loyalty that surrounded him. He felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest, a mixture of regret, respect, and a dawning understanding that he had built his life on the wrong foundations. Everything around him, the mansion, the wealth, the carefully cultivated status, suddenly seemed insignificant in the face of genuine human connection. For a long moment, no one moved. The wealthy man's eyes lowered, his voice too weak to form words. Yet the old biker didn't push him to speak. Instead, he allowed the silence to settle naturally, giving the man room to breathe, to feel, to understand. It was then that the wealthy man realized the truth he had been running from. Respect is not measured by what you own or how loudly you speak, but by the way you treat people who owe you nothing. And for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of that truth settle deep within him. The wealthy man's throat tightened as he lifted his eyes to meet the old biker's steady gaze. He expected to be met with anger or condemnation, but what he saw instead was something far more disarming: understanding. The biker's expression carried a quiet wisdom, as though he had witnessed countless versions of this moment before, people realizing too late that the weight of their pride had harmed someone who never deserved it. That unexpected compassion shook the wealthy man to his core, leaving him unprepared for the emotions rising within him. Behind the old biker, the riders stood united, their silence a testament to a code the wealthy man had never known. These were individuals from different towns, states, and backgrounds, yet they were bound by an unspoken promise to protect one another, not through violence, but through presence. Their unity was not imposed by rank or fear. It was built on loyalty, earned over years of shared roads, shared struggles, and shared victories. The wealthy man saw it clearly now. Their brotherhood held a strength his fortune could never replicate. The old biker spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen men rise and fall through their own choices. He explained that in life, Everyone reaches a moment where they must confront who they truly are, stripped of excuses and illusions. For some, that moment comes quietly. For others, it arrives like thunder. Today, it had arrived for the wealthy man. The biker didn't speak with pride or satisfaction. He spoke with the intention of guiding someone who had lost their way. Every word felt like a hand extended, urging him to see beyond himself. The wealthy man felt the truth settling into his bones. His wealth had protected him from consequences for so long that he had stopped seeing people as human beings. He had mistaken comfort for character, mistaking silence from others as respect rather than resignation. Now, faced with genuine strength, the kind that has nothing to do with material power, he felt the illusion crumble. Standing there in front of the bikers, stripped of his facade, he wondered how many people he had hurt simply because he could. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel small, not in the sense of weakness, but in the sense of humility. It was as if the presence of 200 riders had carved open a space inside him, forcing him to acknowledge truths he had buried beneath ego and wealth. The mansion behind him, once a symbol of success, now felt like a hollow monument. And as he looked at the old biker, he understood that this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about awakening. A breeze rustled the trees lining the mansion's driveway, carrying with it a strange sense of calm. The wealthy man noticed details he had never paid attention to before: the distant hum of engines cooling, the soft scrape of boots on gravel, the rhythmic sound of steady breathing from the riders who watched without judgment. These small sounds formed a quiet symphony of presence, grounding him in a reality he had long ignored. For the first time, the world didn't revolve around him, and oddly, that realization felt like relief. The old biker stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they stood only a few feet apart. Up close, the wealthy man could see the deep lines etched across the biker's face, each one telling a story of resilience and survival. Yet behind those lines, there was no resentment, only a kind of tired kindness that belonged to someone who had learned the hard way that anger consumes far more than it heals. That look alone disarmed the wealthy man more than any words could have. In a voice low and steady, the biker spoke of the past, not his own, but the universal past carried by every person who has ever been underestimated or disrespected. He described how people often hide their struggles behind silent endurance, how the strongest among us rarely boast about what they've overcome. The wealthy man felt those words settle inside him like stones. He realized he had mocked not just a man, but a lifetime of battles he couldn't begin to comprehend. Slowly, the biker reached down and picked up his helmet, turning in his hands as he spoke of dignity, of respect, and of the invisible scars carried by many who never speak of them. His tone remained calm, but the message was sharp. No human deserves to be diminished for the amusement of another. It was a simple truth, yet powerful enough to strike through years of arrogance the wealthy man had built around his heart. And for once, he didn't defend himself. He didn't justify. He simply listened. As the biker finished speaking, silence settled once more, not heavy like before, but contemplative. The riders behind him relaxed slightly, sensing the shift in the air. The wealthy man felt something inside him loosen, as if a knot he had carried unknowingly was finally beginning to unravel. He stood there, humbled and exposed, recognizing that the man he had mocked was, in every way that mattered, stronger than he had ever been. For the first time, the wealthy man saw the possibility of change flickering within reach. The wealthy man felt an unfamiliar heaviness in his chest, the kind that comes when a truth long ignored finally breaks through. He stood there, surrounded by riders who had traveled countless miles to defend someone he had dismissed in an instant. It was a powerful contrast. His life lived behind high walls and locked gates, and they're spent under open skies where loyalty meant everything. The realization dawned on him slowly. These riders were not merely showing support. They were showing him what true community looked like. As he looked from face to face, he saw a diverse group of men and women, each carrying their own stories written in the way they stood, breathed, and watched. Some had weathered jackets patched with memories. Others had tattoos marking important moments of their lives. All of them shared the same steady presence, the same unwavering focus on the man they had come to defend. It made the wealthy man wonder what his own life would look like if stripped of titles and wealth. What stories would he have left to stand on? The old biker drew closer once again, this time not with words but with silence that felt almost comforting. There was something deeply human in the way he stood, not demanding anything, not expecting anything, simply present. The wealthy man felt a sting behind his eyes, a rare and unexpected burn of emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. It wasn't fear. It was regret, raw and undeniable, settling over him like a shadow. The biker finally spoke, telling him that every person has a choice, to continue down the path of pride or to learn from the moments life places in front of them. He explained that growth doesn't come from comfort or superiority, but from humility, from listening, from understanding the weight of one's actions. The wealthy man absorbed every word, feeling them chip away at the hardened shell around his heart. He realized then that this moment, this confrontation, was never about breaking him, but about giving him a chance to see himself clearly. The riders shifted slightly, sensing that the moment of reckoning was drawing to its natural pause. The wealthy man exhaled, his shoulders lowering for the first time that day, as if he were finally releasing a tension he hadn't even realized he carried. The atmosphere no longer felt hostile, but transformative. He understood now that the presence of 200 riders wasn't meant to frighten him. It was meant to wake him up. For the first time, he looked at the old biker, not as someone beneath him, but as someone far wiser than he had ever been. The wealthy man felt the world around him soften as his perspective shifted. The mansion behind him, once a symbol of his success, now looked strangely distant, almost like a shell he had outgrown without realizing it. The silence of the riders began to feel different too, less like judgment and more like an invitation to step into a version of himself he had long forgotten. It was as though the presence of these strangers had peeled away the layers of his life, revealing a truth he could no longer avoid. The old biker observed him quietly, recognizing the subtle transformation. There was no triumph in his eyes, no satisfaction in seeing the wealthy man humbled. Instead, there was a quiet nod, a small acknowledgement that the moment had reached the depth it needed. It was the kind of nod shared between people who understand that change doesn't happen loudly. It happens in stillness, in the quiet shift of a person finally seeing their own reflection clearly. One of the riders in the back stepped forward, placing a firm hand on the old biker's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes. It showed support, unity, and trust, not the kind built in days or through wealth, but through years of shared roads and difficult nights. The wealthy man watched with a mix of awe and longing. He had spent his life surrounded by people who admired his money, not his character. Yet here, in front of 200 strangers, he felt more seen than he ever had. The old biker told him that respect is a choice made every single day, in words, in gestures, and in the way people treat one another when no one is watching. He explained that the world doesn't remember the size of a person's house, but it never forgets the size of their actions. Those words struck deep. The wealthy man realized he had built his life on the wrong kind of foundation, one that couldn't withstand the weight of genuine human connection. The shame he felt wasn't crushing, it was clarifying. As the riders prepared to leave, engines still silent, the wealthy man felt the moment imprint itself on his memory with undeniable force. It was a moment he knew would follow him for the rest of his life, shaping every choice he made moving forward. The old biker gave him one last look, steady, thoughtful, almost hopeful. And in that final exchange, the wealthy man understood that redemption wasn't something granted or taken. It was something earned, one honest action at a time. In the quiet that followed, the wealthy man stood alone at the entrance of his mansion, watching as the riders slowly mounted their bikes one by one. The air felt different now, lighter, clearer, as if the weight of his own pride had finally dissolved into something he could understand rather than fear. The old biker gave him a final nod before turning his gaze toward the open road, a road that had shaped him in ways the wealthy man now deeply respected. It was a moment suspended in time, a moment that would echo in the wealthy man's memory long after the engines roared back to life. As the first engines ignited, their rumble carried a message the wealthy man would never forget. True strength lies not in dominance, but in dignity. He realized then that the 200 riders hadn't come to shame him. They had come to teach him. They had shown him what loyalty looks like, what unity feels like, and how powerful a community can be when it stands for something greater than itself. In that roaring chorus of engines, he heard a lesson he wished he had learned years earlier. When the riders finally pulled away, rolling down the hill in a long, steady line, the wealthy man felt something shift inside him. He understood now that wealth without empathy is an empty shell, and pride without humanity is a cage of one's own making. He watched them fade into the distance, realizing that each rider carried a life of stories, scars and triumphs that he had once been blind to. For the first time, he didn't see them as strangers. He saw them as reminders of the man he wanted to become. The silence that followed their departure felt like a clean slate. The wealthy man stepped back toward his home, not with the arrogance he once wore, but with a humility that softened every part of him. He knew the transformation wouldn't happen overnight, but the moment he faced 200 riders in complete silence had cracked open a truth he could never unsee. From that day forward, he chose to treat every person he met, stranger or not, with the respect he had once withheld so carelessly. And in that choice, he discovered the beginning of something far more valuable than all the wealth he owned. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own path, take a moment to engage with this video. Your like, your comment, and your subscription help us continue bringing powerful stories like this one to life. Join our community, share your thoughts, and help these messages reach the people who might need them most. Your presence here makes all the difference.